By a treat, I mean pure enlightenment. Do you want enlightenment streaming from the heavens, opening up your third eye? Well, that's in store for you today. Round two, Brian Bogert. I have told Brian's story now to at least 25, 30 people. And for some reason, suffering on an intense scale as human beings, I'll speak for myself, triggers within me an emotional response reminding me of the interconnectedness of all of not just humanity, but all living beings, not just on this planet, but all living beings across the universe, and not just this universe, any potential universes through time back and forth in the eternal present, which is to say that when I hear the story of Brian's arm being pinned against two cars, being losing the arm, the nurse exiting the Walmart, she's a saint, stems the bleeding. If you haven't checked out the first interview, you absolutely should. But Brian and I are about to go to war together because he has, through his suffering, the platform to be able to reach a large swath of humanity. And if life has taught me anything, the lessons that I think are so enlightening and so amazing today, I may in 15 years look back on it and go, that was a bit naive. So how do we possibly communicate what people are going to hear that is going to push them into the right places? Authenticity is obviously part of that, but we are going to dive right into that. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to open your third eye with the one, the only, Brian Bogert!
So I have such a deep level of appreciation and gratitude for the way you do intros, brother. You make me sound way cooler and way more capable than I think is really the case. But I'm deeply moved and grateful by the words that you just chose, and I'm excited to be back here with you today because I just enjoy your energy and I enjoy your perspective, and our dialogue is fun.
At the end of the day, I'll take a line from Snoop Dogg. If it's not fun, why are we doing it?
That's right.
So what backstage we were talking about, because look, you're going to get pigeonholed by many, many, many people, if you haven't already, into the guy with the arm and the thing and the arm thing. Okay. And backstage we were talking about, someone winning a gold medal, and now they're the gold medal Olympian for the rest of their life, whether it's an incredible suffering that they went through, whether it's this accolade, whatever it happens to be, that story becomes, for some, golden chains, right? Mm-hmm. It's the holy man's curse of, they're so holy, and then people expect and they put all of this on you because of what you've gone through. So I know you have very positive intentions moving forward. So tell me about this Who project, and talk to me about your next steps and this golden chain idea.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the golden chain idea because I think let's just hit that out of the gate. Here's the thing. I've been on stages since I was age 7 because I have a unique story, right? And I've never been shy, and I've always been able to tell that unique story. And I'm deeply grateful that I got out of the speaking path and the philanthropic path for just long enough to remove myself from the identity that could be attached to that easily from growing up. And so I will tell you that so much of my life, I actually tried to redirect attention away from me and away from my arm, because what I realized early is that my own truth was not even one that people would accept as truth, right? When I'm a 7 and 8 year old looking up at adults and they ask me what happened to my arm when it's in a sling, and I tell them I was run over by a truck and my left arm was ripped off, I got really used to seeing jaws hit the floor and them immediately stutter because their brain couldn't process what I just said. And then they'd look to my parents for validation, like, is he actually telling the truth? So from a very early age, like, I literally had to justify my own reality on something that wasn't what I did. It was something that happened to me. I wanted to be judged based on who I was and the things I did, not something that happened to me. And so I got really good at redirecting the focus. And I will tell you that through my professional career, it was almost never a topic of discussion in my prior life. I mean, 15 years I was in risk management, employee benefits consulting. We built a cool business, ran with some amazing partners, had a lot of fun doing it. It ultimately wasn't my calling in the world, but had I gone directly into speaking and coaching and the stuff that I'm doing today, I also wouldn't have had the 15 years of a whole different role that was actually something I did, not something that happened to me, that allowed me to gain relevance and credibility in how I moved through the world as a person.
Yep.
And because of that 15 years, it was also interesting how many people in that period of time never even knew about my arm. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. I'm reminded of something that Ram Dass says, where we have to, as humans, somehow balance knowing that it's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. You zoom out far enough and you go, wow, the whole thing, right? The whole thing. And then you zoom in and you somehow have to balance that with empathy and compassion, because you can see something like what happened to you. You see some trip on a sidewalk and you just go, karma. It's all perfect. But you're a total a-hole, right? Like there's no compassion. And so finding that balance. And so what I'm hearing you say is you have the capacity to take this story and the chemistry, the chemical cocktail that fires when people hear it, the jaw dropping, the whole thing, and you can use that. That's a tool.
That's
right? It to open them up in such a way that now you can walk them through the Tao, through the path, through the Camino, through this particular thing, assuming your heart's in the right place, and because you've opened their soul.
Which is exactly and probably one of the most beautifully articulated elements of how I view what this story is to me that I've ever heard somebody else repackage, other than probably my business partner and chief growth officer. Truthfully, and so I have to give that credit to you. That is exactly how I see it right now. Is that at the moment, right? Because there was literally people that would be in my life that I would mention my arm, and they're like, "What are you talking about? I've known him for 5 years, right? My arm's 4 inches shorter, my hand's smaller." But what that shows me is I can blend in. I learned how to blend in. I learned how to not make it the center of attention, not like hold my arm and like not be a victim. And so because of that, I also am really strong on who I am outside of this as a part of my identity, because it's not a part of my identity; it's part of who I am. It happened to me. And it shaped me deeply. And so those are the things that I looked at is like, okay, how do I use my pain, my healed pain, and some of my pains that are still healing, to be purposed great enough to give other people the permission to live and own their truth, to heal their own pain, because hopefully my truth gives them the nudge. The reality of it is, what I'm starting to realize is the more I actually lead with my story, there is a huge brand connected to my story. But what I'm starting to feel really grateful for, which I was afraid would never happen, is that my story does exactly what you described. It opens up someone's heart so that they can see and feel mine.
Yeah. So to me, it's ironic because I am imagining Thor's hammer. And sometimes you just need to crack the nut. Gurus do this a lot, man. Like, because at the end of the day, enlightenment is here and now. It's right here. It's right here and now.
Yeah,
and the second we reach out and we try to grab it, it's gone. It's even when you have the thought of reaching out and grab, it's done. It's already gone. And so by the moment someone asks another person, "Are you enlightened?" in that time that it takes for that to process is done, because you're either in the flow or you're not. And that particular idea of just cracking someone's skull and it just opens up with your arm, with your left arm. I have this this vision of you just crack. And when they feel that, because what happens when you tell that story is the person loses their arm. That's what happens. Or they feel their child losing their arm. Yep. And they literally, like, that whole thing happens on a psychological, emotional, and spiritual level. And now you've almost like hurt them in a way, like you've damaged them psychologically, because they're going, oh, right. Like their empathy muscle is flexing. And in that space, you now have an opportunity to do something.
Oh, and by the way, in that space is the only way that most people will receive vulnerability and authenticity for what it actually is.
Okay.
Vulnerability and authenticity are the glue that binds human connection. And I learned a long time ago that, like, you can move people with words and situations, but if you don't move them at the soul level, right, like it's not actually going to transform who they are, their life, in a way that's meaningful. It'll just be a strategy and a tactic. And so what I did learn over the years, and this was not intentional, by the way, I think it was really a mode of survival, is I learned how to make someone feel something, to move them just enough that their wall goes down, because that's the only way I can enter with what my actual gifts are. And what's been really fascinating is now my chief growth officer, he's one of the people that I've met, he's one of the master communicators on this planet. He can move people and make them feel in a way that, by the way, isn't my natural gift. I've just learned how to do it so that I can allow my actual gift to come into play. When he and I go into a room, he can move them. They're already ready to receive. Then I can pour completely into them. And so it's a hybrid model of both. What I want to say, though, is I want to go back to something that you said about enlightenment, because I agree with you. Pure enlightenment is in the now. Everything you said, I agree with one slight pivot. There's layers of enlightenment. You're either in flow or you're not in flow, but you can also, I believe, be in hybrid flow in an awake state. And so you can be in a position where I believe that when someone asks me if I'm self-actualized, or they ask me if I'm enlightened, here's my answer. I am as self-actualized or as enlightened as I can be right now. Because the reality of it is my level of enlightenment, my level of consciousness, my level of awareness is only going to continue to grow, because that's my sole focus right now. The more I raise my level of consciousness, the more wisdom can flow through me versus me having to access knowledge. The less I have to really focus in the moments of energy drain and resistance in this world, but can put myself into pure flow state. Because, oh, by the way, that's the way you can bend and manipulate time, which we've convinced ourselves is the only asset we can't create more of. But when you put yourself into a place of flow, you absolutely can bend and manipulate time and accomplish what might seem worldly impossible in a traditional way in very short periods of time. It's one Tony Robbins used to say, you can compress decades into days. There's ways to do it. So that's the only thing I'm hoping that the people hear is, you're 100% right. Enlightenment is in the now. I do agree, you're either in it or you're not. But I don't believe that if somebody asks if you're enlightened or self-actualized, that you can't answer the question honestly, because at the end of the day, everything we already need is already in us. But wherever you are right now is as far as you've probably ever been. Own that and acknowledge that. That does not mean that you don't have still places to grow and go in your enlightenment and in your self-actualization.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my 7-year-old daughter and I go, here's a fully enlightened being.
Mm-hmm.
Because Leia in chat. Love you, Leia. How you doing? Leia's been through it, by the way. Leia just showed him in chat. She said, good morning. I love this conversation. And we love you, Leia. She's had multiple things she's gone through. And so, yes, I look at my daughter as a fully realized being, because she's my guru. I have a 7-year-old 3rd grade guru.
But by the way, it's because they're pure when they come out.
Oh, dude.
They're born as the brightest, most burning, authentic light they'll ever be. And it's us, the world, that screws them up.
I just love, and I think from a certain perspective, we are exactly the same thing that you just described. You know what I mean? Like, if I think of my dead mom's spirit and my dead father who died when I was 2, looking down on me, he or up at me, whatever, in from me, out from me, whatever. He's looking at me like, little buddy, you're perfect, man. You're perfect, dude. In the eyes of my father, and this is where Jesus got it right. He used that father. It's not my authority, it's the authority of the Father, and that really moved people. It really moved them. I oftentimes wonder if he had just said mother, how different our culture would have been. As a kind of like a mental exercise. No, if he had just gone, it's on the authority of the mother who sent me, the mother this, the mother that, because I don't think the word father, I think it just means parent. You know what I mean? It's in the authority of that authority beyond mine. I love being religiously multilingual. I love being able to talk about Buddhism, Siddhartha, Gautama, Hinduism. So Krishna and Rama are incarnate, they're avatars of Vishnu, right? And Vishnu is part of the triangle again, which is so fascinating because Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Now you've got Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. Shiva the destroyer, Vishnu the maintainer. It's just, I don't know, man. At the end of the day, I think that trying to be as compassionate as humanly possible and understanding the interconnectedness of human beings is what's going to drive us to be in a good place now and be in a better place tomorrow.
I couldn't agree more. Here's the thing, and I'm going to say this about religion. I have also studied a variety of religions. I like that you say you're multilingual. I am not the type that typically can study something and it just gets ingrained like in the exact philosophy and the exact terminology. I think when I talk about raising my level of consciousness and letting wisdom flow through me, I'm finding that seems to be a much more powerful way for me. But it's about understanding the perspective and the context, because at the end of the day, and I don't mean this as anything negative, because it serves a very beneficial role, and it's not something that I think should be viewed as good or bad. I think it's a matter of what works for you. But religion, in a lot of ways, is a belief system that people can attach to that allows them to have like a thought process and a guide for how to live, right? Like in some way, that's kind of what religion is. And there's more to it. Obviously, there's spirituality, there's faith, there's sometimes really ritualistic practices. So this is talking universally across the day. But at the end of the day, like all of those things are great, like attached to a belief system. But here's the one thing that I struggle with. Why can't more people view religion as that and recognize that we have varying belief systems, but what's the one thing we all have in common? We all share the common human experience. That's what binds us all. And I believe in my time of doing this type of work that we are all hardwired for 4 things, often which religion helps us get. We all desire to feel safe. We all desire to feel protected. And oh, by the way, those are not the same thing. We all desire to feel seen and understood. And we all desire to feel connected. Religion provides community that, in theory, fosters that. We also know that there are damaging elements of religion as it relates to toxic shame that might exist in certain of them, ways that people are restrained or restricted based on the belief systems, which again, I'm not judging as good or bad. I'm just looking at how does that impact the people that are a part of that belief system. It can sometimes, unless they see it for what it is, be a little damaging to them. And at the end of the day, if we can recognize that that's really what we all desire, that is empathy and compassion, or I love that you even said paired with empathy and compassion. Those are 2 things I talk about often, right? When we can actually view people and attempt to see their reality from a place that's objective and non-judgmental, it allows us to see them as who they are, vulnerability and authentically, and allows us to demonstrate who we are from a position of empathy and compassion that is demonstrated through being vulnerable and authenticity. And when we recognize that that's what we have to do, is if we just ask ourselves in every scenario, with every interaction that we have, is the person on the other side of me, or am I feeling safe, feeling protected, feeling seen and understood, and am I feeling connected right now? And if the answer to any one of those 4 is no, try to understand what can I do to alter the scenario, my consciousness, the way I communicate, the way I connect, to foster an environment where we both can be experiencing that. Because if that happens, that's where deep and profound transformation and connection takes place. And that's what can unify us as a society and as a culture and as a world, because at the end of the day, we're going to have multiple belief systems. I don't want us to judge whether they're good or bad. Let's just see them for what they are and recognize the only thing that we actually all have in common is the human experience. And regardless of belief system, we all are hardwired around a few core things.
Yep.
So let's simplify it and start getting back to focusing on people first.
Yeah, I mean, and then if you want to get, and I agree with everything you just said, and then extend it to animals, and then extend it to that little insect. Right. Imagine you're a freaking insect for a second. Have insect empathy for just a second as a mental exercise. You know what I mean? Just pretend for a second that they are as alive as you are. Right? Mm-hmm. Just for a millisecond, look at that spider and go, it's going through the same thing. It gets nervous. It gets scared. It's got a thing it wants to do. It is trying to live its best life. It's spidering right now. Okay. You are peopling right now, and it's spidering right now. And it looks at you, and you are a demigod. You are a titan that just as you move throughout this planet. From the perspective of these insects, you are just otherworldly. Yep. And it may pray and hope to be reincarnated as you. Oh, if I could just be a titan in my next life. I mean, Lord, look at this thing. We inspire fear as we just pound on the earth.
But you're spot on. You're spot on. So my wife and I just recently, she's a giant animal lover. And at some point we will have, I guarantee it, in animal rescue because her dream and desire is to take older animals, dogs in particular, cats, like home animals, but expand it to others that have lived a full life that are the ones that nobody wants anymore, but just need a place to like retire in their pasture, right? Because at the end of the day, what we've realized, and we've just recently fostered a dog, we were a foster fail, but that was with the aha moment. Like this dog, literally, here's the crazy part. Animals, living beings, and humans all desire those same four things. And we've talked about this in our household, is how similar, right, animals and humans are. The catch with animals is they just heal a lot faster. They don't hold on to stuff the same way that we do because they aren't as complicated. They aren't as complex. Their triggers don't keep them stuck. Their patterns don't keep them stuck for as long. They do for a minute. We bring in this foster. She was on the street. She had a litter of puppies. The only reason we had a foster is because they needed to let her milk dry out before they could adopt her and spay her. But literally, and there was definitely abuse, likely from men in her world. And she legitimately like was afraid of me, but also drawn to me. It was an interesting thing. But what my wife did and what I did, my wife did most of it. We created an environment for this dog to feel safe, to feel protected, to feel seen and understood. Like, yeah, here's where your trauma is. That's why you react when a male voice is strong, right? And to feel connected to something. And in a matter of weeks, we saw this timid, scared, but good-hearted dog literally transform to the fact that she has actually helped our other animals in our house become more outwardly focused because she's got some perspective. She's actually been on the street. She knows how good she's got it now. Whereas other dogs are like, oh, I mean, I've been in this house my whole life. Yeah, they just don't know. It's been an interesting thing because she's actually evolved and she's kind of the pack leader now, but in a healthy way. And my wife and I talked about that point blank. It's like, it's amazing how much animals can be teachers for us, how much kids can be teachers for us. Because again, kids repair faster than adults do. There's less patterning and conditioning. But it's the same thing. If we can all view the world through like, okay, everybody, every living being here wants to feel those four things, damn, it'll be a much more beautiful world to live in.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. And I was playing basketball. Before I go into the story, I want to give a shout out to those one guy. He and I played a bunch of chess back in the day when I was a chess streamer on Twitch. He writes, I don't know if you were at 165 followers before, but congrats on 165 followers. Thank you, sir. And he writes, can confirm I was empathy and compassion. So empathy and compassion vibes. Love you, buddy. Good to see you. Glad you're back. I was playing basketball. And I'm growing a Jesus beard because I want people to think I'm more spiritual. And I bought funny because it's true.
That's why I laughed, by the way. I knew it was true. And that's
funny because it's true. Yeah, it's funny because it's true. And I bought these expensive shoes. It was hard to buy them. I wasn't wearing socks at the Famous Footwear, so I didn't even try them on. And so on faith, I was like, ooh, these are 11s. I'm usually a 10.5. I'm not even going to try them on, but I feel like these are the shoes, right? Let's go. So I bought these shoes. My kids were there. I was in a rush at the whole thing. Anyway, so I show up with my new kicks to the basketball court, and there's a friend of mine there. His name's Mark, and Mark and I have had it out, dude. Like he was yelling at me, 16, 17, young kid. And he gets really enraged on the basketball court, and I was not going to let him go. We had kind of a guru moment where it's like, hey, man, because what would happen is he would take a shot. He'd make a bucket. I'd be like, good shot, dude. Nice bucket. Good, cool. And whenever I would go in, it's always, with this and that and blah, like complaining. And it was a very stark kind of contrast in the way we were approaching the game. And he got really, really angry. And now we have a really good relationship because we made it through this sort of anger vibe. So, hey, Mark, how's it going? How's your back? Whatever. And we were playing and we were choosing who was going to be on whose team. And the other team had the tall guys, the tall trees, right? It was Carlos and Taif, and those dudes are tall and they're good ballers. But I picked guys I have chemistry with, right? I'm like, I played a bunch with Connor. I know where he hits. Like, I know, like, he and I have good chemistry. He's not as tall, but I know this guy. So I picked Connor first, and they all go for the tall trees. And he literally hides behind these two guys because he doesn't want me to pick him. And I got chemistry with Mark. I know how he plays. I'm like, Mark, come on. And you could just see his energy sink. He just goes, God, like, we're going to get smoked. We're done, you know? And his energy affected mine. I was like, are we going to get smoked? You know, I was like, no, totally. Ye of little faith. You know, I'm like, ye of little faith. And so we start playing 7-1. We're up 7-1. And I went to Mark and I pushed him. I was like, and you thought we were going to get toasted. He laughed. It's just, I mean, what sweet, delicious lessons, are present when we see the God in other people. And I will close the story with this, which is Carlos and the other team kept saying, it's the wind. It's the wind, because it was windy. And they were like, every time you guys shoot, there's no wind. And every time we shoot, there's wind. And in my head, I'm like, they're so wind attached, right? They're just, their minds are just so like you're not even thinking about the shot. You're thinking about the wind. You can't win like that. And Carlos on the other team at one point turned to me and he said, what are you, God? You got the Jesus beard? You did the whole thing? Or like, are you controlling the wind? And I'm like, no, but you are. And that little switch, it's like, you're the enlightened one, you're the master, you're the teacher, teach me.
Mm-hmm. All the way around, I love that story. There was one little thing that you said in there that I want to draw attention to, because again, there's no pivots on anything. I love the story, and even the way you tied the lesson with Carlos at the end, because the reality of it is you're exactly right. He was controlling it because it's him focusing on it. But I'm also going to say, you likely were controlling it in the fact that you were influencing your surrender to the universe to take care of what you knew could happen. So there's that piece. The other side of it, though, is you said, yeah, his name, did you say your buddy's name was Mark or Mike or?
Yeah, Mark.
Mark. So when you said, yeah, you all of a sudden were affected by his energy, that's real. Here's the catch about empathy and compassion. When we truly move ourselves to a position to be empaths, to recognize and feel what other people feel, sometimes it gets confusing because we have to then be very intentional to distinguish between our feelings and the feelings that we're carrying for other people. This is something we're working on with our 6-year-old right now, our daughter. She feels everything. And there's these moments where she's saying, like, I don't know why I want to cry right now. Well, the reality of it is what we're learning more than anything is because she's a deeply intuitive and deeply feeling being. So the other night we're stretching in our office. With my body, I've got to do multiple hours of body work every day, have to keep my muscles loose. And oh, by the way, I get down on that sometimes. As like happy and positive as I get, when I'm 2 hours into body work and putting myself into that intentional pain so I can keep myself loose, sometimes I get a little discouraged. I get a little down, right? It just happens sometimes. And I recognize it for what it is. I become aware of it. I own it. I unroot it and I move through it. But she picked up on the millisecond of the energy shift when I was in this particular spot where I hit a thing. And she literally said it the other night. She said, and instantly, nothing else had happened. She was in there stretching with me for 45 minutes. And she's like, Daddy, I don't know why I want to cry right now. And I was able to bring to her awareness. I was like, well, here's what you were probably picking up on. My physical pain and the fact that I twinged in the moment. But I said, I don't think that's what you read. I think you picked up on the fact that you picked up on the millisecond of concern, disappointment, anger that I was still carrying on the fact that sometimes I still have to do this. And we needed to have a productive conversation about that because, again, had you actually embodied Mark's energy, you'd embodied his methodology, you would have lost. You were enlightened enough in that moment to recognize it for what it was and identify it not as your energy and emotion because you saw what could happen. But how often do we get affected by the narratives of the world or the feelings of other people, whether it's spoken or unspoken? And we don't give credit to that. And so not only do we have to unpack our own triggers and really be able to move through those, but at some point, that's the real gift of starting to be enlightened, is to recognizing which feelings are yours and which ones are not. You did that real time, and I'm not even sure you realized how profound that particular statement in your story was.
Yeah, I can still feel it because I just remember it reminds me of a story. And I love that you've got a daughter a similar age to my daughter, because every time you talk about her, I'm right there with you. Like I'm just right there in that moment, that twinge, and her picking up on it and all that. Yeah. My guru's a 3rd grade girl.
It's true. It's funny though, because we've got friends in our life that say that our daughter's the most enlightened 6-year-old they've ever met. Right.
That.
And it's like, again, I take that for what it means or what it doesn't mean, but it's like, you know what? She's like a pretty pure soul and we're just trying not to screw it up. We just want to do whatever helps make her heart happy. Because if that happens and we can keep her making the choices that are going to make her heart happy and be confident and own who she is, everything else will take care of itself. Yeah. What's guaranteed is we're probably going to screw it up. We're probably going to create damage because we can't see it all and we can't anticipate everything. And there are little moments that we still have resistance that come out in our parenting. And that's what we're trying to be really aware of, is to make sure that our stuff doesn't create patterns and damage in their world when it doesn't need to.
It's all grist for the mill, as Ram Dass would put it. You're tilling the soil. It's the arm, it's the enlightenment arm. You know what I mean? The damage itself is part of the karma. It is unavoidable. It's unavoidable by design. There is no movie you will ever watch that has no damage in it. There is no game you will ever play where the enemy can't hurt you. There is always the pattern through which, once you realize the dance of the game, you will have taken a lesson from it. And even in the Ramayana, which is this Hindu story, I was fully expecting it to be some story that isn't every other story I've ever heard, but it is the same story. Here's the prince, here's the princess, here's the love story, here's the drama, here's the evil guy, here's what happens to the evil guy, here's the overcoming of that. That is just all there is. It's just that same story retold. And so you can't fail her. You can't.
But why do you think it's that same story told, right? Here's the thing. If we go back to human connection, safety, protection, seen, understood, connection. What's empathy and compassion, vulnerability and authenticity? What's it all rooted in? Love. I wrote this the other day. I'm going to read it to you real quick because what you just said inspired me to this thought. Because this is about love, but it's also about love with yourself. It's about love with other people, and it's about relationships, not just with yourself, but the other people in your world, whether that's intimate, romantic, love, kids, or professional, right? Like, just think about this. This was actually written for someone in my world that was struggling through a relationship, but this concretes the points that we're making here. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. That's the price of pure and true love. The pain of the journey also is the joy in the journey. The interesting path also leads to freedom and deep levels of intimacy that only further reveal themselves in pure surrender. This ensures not just a beautiful partnership and outcome, but also a joy-filled, interesting journey. Result: growth as individuals, forging a bond around growth together. Unity, trust, embodied love, connection. If we think about this not as just relationships and with people and with love or romantic relationships, but we view it as love and relationship with ourselves first. Understanding who we are, understanding exactly what you just said. Those difficult moments are a part of the path. They're a beautiful part of the path. Damage and pain is guaranteed. Suffering is optional. That's why I say often we all must choose our pain or our suffering will choose us. It's inevitable that one happens. Take the active, proactive choice and you also get joy, freedom, and fulfillment through it. But if you take the passive route, suffering is guaranteed. And so at the end of the day, love, relationships, connection, intimacy with yourself or with other people are all rooted in the same concepts. And that's what's going to bring people and unify people around the world.
If you ever find yourself listening to someone and you can go through something that Ram Dass and Alan Watts went through. And then we are going to wrap this up because it's a 30-minute show that we've gone over, and I want to be respectful of your time and the time of the listeners who expect it to be approximately some amount of time. So Ram Dass, which is Hindu for servant of Ram, which is why I'm interested in Hindu culture, because Ram Dass, I am madly in love with a deceased Jewish former professor, Harvard professor turned Hindu guru named Ram Dass, formerly Richard Albert. And he told a story where he was hanging out with Alan Watts, and Alan Watts is a very famous, influential philosopher, Taoist, incredible soul. And Ram Dass found himself socially just hanging out with Alan Watts at one point where Alan was really talking a lot. And he was like getting bugged. Ram Dass was sort of like, when do I get a turn? Like, I want a turn, you know? And then he had that moment where he's like, wait a second. Remember that each individual you come in contact with is just, that's God. That's the guru. You are listening to the guru speak to you the wisdom of the universe, and you're either going to listen to it or you are not. End of story. And he had that moment where he's like, oh yeah, we're just a body, and he's just being the mouth right now. It's nice. That's wonderful. Right. He's just being the mouth. Great. Be the mouth.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I will close with this, and then you will get the last word for sure. I want everyone to know that when Brian is speaking, I'm obviously trying to give him my full attention, but I'm hitting the mute button and I'm taking very deep breaths. And the reason I hit the mute button is because this is annoying to hear when someone else is talking. But I just want everyone to realize that the amount of oxygen in your body plays a really important role in your mental health. And so even though you do not hear me take these wildly outrageous breaths all the time, I want you to know that it is happening. And I'm doing that while listening. And I want you to experiment with that as you move through life, if you have not already done so. Brian, final words, drop some wisdom on the fine folks.
Well, I think you just hit a really important moment, because what we recognize is the things that keep us blocked in this world, right? I always talk about it as emotional triggers, but what I'm starting to evolve some of the language in all of these things is we all know what resistance and energy drain feels like. And oftentimes those difficult moments where we're faced with resistance or an energy drain because we've either hit some conflict or we've been emotionally triggered or there's something happening in our world, like so often we get rattled in a way that we don't know what to do with it. And so often, and this comes full circle with our thought process, you can center to the now through your breath. Pure enlightenment, right, as we talked about, comes in the now. That's also when you can bend and manipulate time, is when you can actually be purely and 100% present. That's when you become the vessel for the message. That's when wisdom flows through you versus having to access knowledge. The key, truly, to a lot of this is a lot of these concepts that we talked about, but one of the most effective tools any one of us can deploy is our breath. And so I appreciate that you closed with that, because that is often in those moments when you get triggered, even something as simple as just, whether or not it's as deep and loud as we were seeing just a second ago, or even if it becomes subtle, but people can see the pause. It's not a bad thing for them to see the pause. It's not a bad thing for you to calibrate so that you can respond versus react. It's actually a brilliant thing. And so one of the greatest ways to move yourself to a position of ownership, accountability, ultimate influence and control over your own destiny is to learn how to control your breath. And there's actually been scientific fact that's been proven to this. It's been obviously practiced by so many thought processes, religious leaders for centuries, since the beginning of time. Because it's also really ironic that it's one of our only absolutely essential mechanisms and organs for survival that we also have voluntary control over. That's not a coincidence, people. It's not a coincidence that our breath is the only thing that's required for us to stay alive that we actually have voluntary control over. We don't have 100% control over our minds. We don't have 100% control over our livers, our spleens, our stomachs, all of it. Like we don't. We can start to get more control as we raise our consciousness in our body, but our breath is something that we're all born with the ability to control. Not a coincidence. Pay attention to what he just said, because there is gold in what he just said.
Ladies and gentlemen, BrianBogert.com, BrianBogert.com,
BRIAN.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm tripping.
It's not Brian Bogert, it's Brian Bogert.
That just gives me an opportunity to say it again. Man, was I saying Brian Bogert?
Oh, Brian Bogert. Yeah,
dude, I love that. I love that. You're going to have to talk to a Freudian psychologist for the next 20 years to understand why. Because I was thinking about the brain. How funny is that?
Well, what's really funny about that is you said Bran, but so often people mix up my name and they call me Brain, or they'll spell it Brain.
Oh, 100%.
It's been hilarious because like the brand and the brain are things that like for years people have been like, oh, no, it's Brian.
Got to use that somewhere. They call me Brain. You can call it Brian Brain Bogert. You know what I mean? That's a whole thing because it's in there. I guarantee you it's in there. Brian, I apologize. BRIAN. BOGERT.com. Repetition is the key to success. BRIAN BOGERT.com. Brian Bogert.
Can I close with one more thing because of what you just said? You said repetition is the key to success.
Yeah.
Really powerful. I got to give one more piece of value here.
Yeah, go.
I say consistency is the key. Relentless consistency is what unlocks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Bogert, pleasure as always. Such a wild ride, dude. It's so much fun having you on the show. Shout out to Lamb Morrison in chat and those one guy. Love you both. All right, guys. We'll see y'all for the next episode. Go to brianbogert.com. Bye, everybody.